Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast, hosted by Alison Humphries. The Recruitment Leadership Podcast is here to help those in the recruitment industry gain awareness and understanding on the hot topics faced by those in the business of hiring people. In each episode, Alison Humphries is joined by a fellow expert to offer professional knowledge, insight and advice on the biggest subjects affecting recruitment businesses. It's the podcast to listen to for recruitment business frontrunners seeking expert information from industry-leading advisors. Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. Thank you for joining me. And if you're a regular listener, you'll know that a lot of my recent guests, we've had a big theme about efficiencies in recruitment. So we've done a lot of work on business development and account development and how you can improve your team's skills and consistency in those areas. But equally important is efficiency in filling job orders for optimized cash flow and profitability. So regular listeners to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast can go check out the resources page on recruitmentleadership.co.uk, where you can get podcasts plus a whole series of how-to PDFs and other guides. Or you can go to wherever you prefer to get your podcasts for the Recruitment Leadership Podcast, previous episodes, or you can go to Amazon and search Alison Humphries, that's with an IES, and you'll find my 2 books, which are also highly relevant to this topic. But to my guest. So I'm very pleased to be joined today by Alex Hashash. Alex is Managing Director of Global Capability, and effectively, Alex manages a business that sources skills in recruitment in all sorts of levels from pretty much most of the English-speaking world. And Alex is personally now based in Nairobi in Kenya. So, Alex, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Shall we start with a basic? So,
Sure.
for my audience, I wonder if you would explain your background in terms of what they'll understand, how it's relevant to recruitment business leaders, and what's your special angle on
Sure.
offshoring?
So yeah, I guess without giving you the full life story, look, personally, I've been in recruitment for the last 16 years. I still classify myself still being in recruitment, still out here finding talent. For me, I was very lucky, started as an apprentice and grew up all the way to a director. And whilst I was director within healthcare recruitment, I was responsible for 120 staff in South Africa, 20 people in India, and I even went to go and live in India. So for me personally, I guess I've grown up in a global business for the last 16 years. Really got an insight into what it's like at desk level, especially when you implement offshore teams. And then on top of that, also from a leadership perspective, saw a lot of changes in the different markets that, at least I had teams in. And I guess the reason why I am where I am now in the world is because seeing those changes in those markets, for me, there was kind of a light bulb moment, and you had to look at emerging markets and then kind of next epicenter of where talent's going to come from. So for me, it's about talking about the emerging markets and I guess what they can bring. Of course, they're not risk-free and it's not all plain sailing, but it's interesting if you look at the mature markets like India, if you look at Philippines, and definitely in the Americas, there's a lot of well-established offshore markets. Most notably, I guess, in Africa, you've got South Africa and Egypt leading the way. So for me, it's just trying to dive in a bit deeper, I guess, give a bit of exposure on at least what I've experienced. I'm not here to say I'm right about everything, but there's a lot that at least I guess I can share. And hopefully that can help some of your listeners in terms of looking at different markets and maybe not just planning for now, but planning for the future.
So I think it's really important that you've had that experience of managing offshore teams and, seeing what can work and what can go wrong. But you make a really important point, Alex, and that is that these are not fixed markets. We've already seen countries with successful offshoring for UK recruitment businesses, for example, where because of demand, in effect, the price saving sort of starts to diminish, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so new markets are emerging. And there are a number of other factors that help with that. Obviously, it's productivity, the
Sure.
level of education of the workforce. There's the whole issue of government encouragement of these
Quite right.
schemes and working models and so forth. So you make a really important point that even if you think you know about this, you
Mm.
need to listen to Alex's up-to-date information. I myself have introduced a lot of UK-based recruitment businesses to South African offshoring sources, and they've worked very well. But,
Yeah.
they're not necessarily the best possible opportunity right now. So tell us, if you would, most UK recruitment business owners are really feeling the pinch in terms of profit. And it's not just the UK.
Yeah.
There are some encouraging signs early 2026 in terms of high level growth in demand, in other words, job orders. But none of this is going to actually reap an advantage for recruitment businesses in developed markets unless they are efficient at delivering. Yeah. Tell us, if you would, about the emerging markets for offshoring and business development targeting for
Sure.
recruiters. What are the criteria and what are the risks for each of the emerging markets?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just to probably start on your point, look, without a shadow of a doubt, South Africa, great talent. It's been formidable in terms of, at least I know in the UK market, we've been really well exposed to South African talent.
Yep.
But definitely competition's there. Every competitor knows that you've got great people in your business, and then a new company can come in and obviously offer somebody, more money. And really it's actually about how do you build a team? How do you retain the best people as well? And I think that's also something that, with South Africa, yes, the cost is rising without a shadow of a doubt. And that's really brought in kind of the next phase of emerging talent. Now, something just to share with what's going on the ground here. But recently, Kenya, most people would think Kenya, where exactly does that fit into outsourcing? Because actually they don't really know many other countries apart from India, Philippines, and maybe South Africa. And especially
Yep.
that's kind of in the UK conversations that I've had, but also myself, even for me, South Africa was kind of the first one in Africa. But actually now being here on the ground, what's really opened my eyes is that a lot of the world is already open to a lot of Africa, especially Kenya and East Africa. Kenya is, of course, the most mature market across East Africa. When we talk about East Africa, we've got Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, and kind of these hubs where, I guess for Kenya, it's the main, more mature market. And it's a huge market here for the US. So a lot of the US business is the main export for outsourcing. And really now what's been happening on the ground is actually you've got a formation of an outsourcing alliance here in Kenya. So that's the first real establishment of, okay, they're open for business, but they're here to get organized. What this outsourcing alliance has brought to the party is more actually some interesting rankings. So firstly, maybe this might surprise some of your listeners, but Kenya ranks 11th in the world for at least customer service delivery. And, I guess comparing, number one is India. And it's about the confidence that people have in those markets. So you've got India at number one, you've got similar countries in terms of Dominican Republic in the Americas, like Colombia, second, third. And actually, South Africa is kind of ranking, I believe seven or eighth within that league table. So actually what you can see is firstly, Kenya's gone up one place in the last year. So definitely that's growing and it's going to be into the top 10, fingers crossed, coming next year. But actually it's they already exist. This league table is between 1 to 16 countries, with Guatemala being at the 16th place. And, predominantly there's a lot of America's countries within the rankings. But I guess for me, it's about saying, actually, that probably would surprise most people that Kenya's even in that conversation, at least from the UK perspective and in the
Yeah,
recruitment world.
I think you're right. And some of our listeners won't be aware. Nairobi, as the capital and largest city, has a metropolitan area population of, I think it's more than 9 million. So
Yeah,
slightly bigger than London in terms of the whole metropolitan area.
exactly.
It's a sophisticated economy. You raise an interesting point there about Americas. So North American companies have typically, have often gone to the Philippines,
Sure.
Manila and so forth, but also
Yeah,
to South American countries.
exactly.
And with the American recruitment businesses that are in my network, what they're telling me is that it's a very, very patchwork quilt in South America, in that
Mm,
some of the economies are chaotic, the black market and grey
sure.
market are dominant, that connectivity is unreliable. And in certain countries, there are a set of employment rights that make it very difficult. So, for
Sure.
example, sickness absence make it very
Yeah.
difficult to work in this way. And where they have had success, what they're saying is they've seen that efficiency saving diminish rapidly.
Yeah.
Because obviously, these are huge American businesses chunking massive amounts of work into an economy, and in some cases it's enough to distort the economy or change the economy so that the efficiencies aren't there anymore for other
Yeah.
people. So being right on the edge of this is important. And could I just go back to, you mentioned
Mm.
Kenya being 11th in this ranking. What are the criteria for this ranking?
Yeah. No, really good question. So it basically they drill in on how confident are you if you can find the talent? So that's one element. How
Mhm.
good is the accent? So I guess, the voice. And then also they look into things like economic stability. And they also look at political stability. The economic stuff in emerging markets, you're going to get quite high volatility when it comes to foreign exchange and
Mhm.
things like that. But I mean, it definitely works to your favor if you've got a stronger currency like the pound or things like that. And ultimately, it's really just about doing a survey across the sector, across the BPO, not just in Kenya, globally. Over 250 companies were asked, and it was about saying how confident would you feel about ultimately operating here, running a business, but also how good is the talent and how confident do you feel that you can keep not just dipping into that talent pool, but imagine you take a huge chunk of that, is that getting replenished? Have you got enough
Mhm.
people with good education coming through? And it's these sorts of things. Now, look, with rankings, you're talking about 0. X percentage of a difference between maybe like seventh and 11th. But like Mexico is 10th. And I guess for me, I've always known Mexico is a really great kind of location where a lot of the Americans do go, and for Kenya to be just kind of 0. I'm not going to try and make up the number on the spot, but 0. Something, off Mexico. I mean, Mexico's been running for a very long time. So I think for
Yeah.
me, it's really also looking at, yes, this is the confidence index now, but this is going to keep going, and it's a really interesting report. Be happy to share it as well, and it's designed really by the data analysts out there and the people that can really produce the information that you or I maybe not only would I maybe get a bit bored reading some of it, but they actually make it visually excellent. So I think it's just super
Mhm.
interesting and one that, for any business, it's not me just saying come to Kenya. Of course, Nairobi, I've got a lot of great things to say about the city, the infrastructure and things like that. And we can talk about that in a moment. But there's a lot of other countries on there that maybe business leaders would also want to consider, because at the end of the day, you want to evaluate every country that you can, compare them against each other, and
Mhm.
go with not just the talent, but I guess the delivery setup as well.
Right. I think this is quite important that listeners do understand the criteria, because then they can identify what the risks might be. And sorry, could you just point them to where they can access this report?
Yeah, this was actually shared with the members, or soon to be members of the Outsourcing Alliance. So it's something
Mhm.
that I would be able to share with you. You would be able to share this. This is something that's publicly available. It's one that obviously would allow people to kind of just read it for themselves and tap into each
Okay.
box.
So we'll put the link in the notes to this show, shall we?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. We touched on quite a lot of topics there. Why don't we zoom in now on Kenya, where you've chosen to live? And I'd like you to discuss in detail what's good about it and what remains a challenge for recruitment businesses who want to offshore?
I guess without, doing any disrespect to other countries in Africa, but I can only compare. I guess one of the reasons why I decided that Kenya was also a very good place to come is you're looking at different things. The infrastructure, it's not. I'll probably jinx it now, but at the end of the day, it's not power cuts like you would get load shedding in terms of the power grid in South Africa. So that's great. I mean, this building that we're in, it's a government building, got backup generators. But as I say this, there is a thunderstorm outside. But at the same time, they've basically built fiber internet. So that's undersea. You got 5G internet. At the end of the day, I mean, you're always chasing that sometimes in places in the UK. And really, for me, it's not just, I guess, the infrastructure that ticks the right boxes to say, okay, everything works, everything's there for a disaster recovery plan. I guess that's also just as important. But I guess the next step is also looking at, is there flexibility for employers? And I guess, do you have that ability to be able to obviously operate a business with the right, at the end of the day, everyone wants to treat their employees with the most utmost respect and would do all the right things. But it also it needs to work both ways. At the end of the day, a job needs to be done. That's what someone's being paid to do. And obviously that's business critical. Otherwise the job wouldn't be there. So things like the employment laws are really, really straightforward here. Of course, things have still got to be done properly. You've got to be able to put things in writing, have HR, have the right conversations and deal with those that any professional business would already be operating in those processes. But there's obviously a lot more, there's less red tape, I would put it that way. You don't, it's 1 week's notice on probation. It's after that, it's 1 month's notice after probation, very similar to the UK. Look, ex-colony of course, but I guess there's a lot of similarities there. School systems, UK-based school system, obviously it's evolved massively since then, but everyone learns in English. You're going to school from primary school and you're only learning in English, you're reading textbooks in English. So I guess that's also another benefit is the English speaking, it is as good as South Africa, in the sense of everybody can speak excellent English. There's a criteria they use B2 level English.
And there's speaking excellent English and there's having a sympathetic business style, isn't there? Which we don't always find in some other countries. So I'm certainly aware, listeners can, I'm sure, interpret this themselves, but I've certainly been disappointed in some countries where people's English may be great, but the business style is very, very deferential, very wordy, and a little bit too indirect to actually be effective in the world of recruitment. The other thing that made me a big fan of South Africa, and I'm not saying I'm not anymore, but I'm always open to what's the latest, is that there was a very established recruitment community there. So these are people who have worked in recruitment previously,
Right.
and maybe for a fairly medium or even large company, and so they've got those skills. We're not having to teach everything from scratch. Does that apply in Nairobi?
It's a really good question. I guess what I've seen and what's clear as day is you can find people, of course, with 8 years recruitment experience. Ultimately, the job market is tough for those sorts of levels of roles. So is that talent readily available, or is it coming at a higher price? Because you can't get away from cost, of course. But actually, realistically, the global recruitment market, if we can call it that, outside of Africa, because it's very, very different, is really, you'd find people with about 5 years experience. So it's been since 2020 where that's kind of really boomed. And that's mainly because that's when you've had a lot of companies start entering Kenya from global investors. And that allowed there to be kind of that exposure to the way recruitment's done, at least in our markets and in our world. Because traditionally in Africa, when you talk about recruitment, that's tied into HR. And HR, of course, no disrespect to anyone in HR, but it's not a sales role and it's not how we approach recruitment. And there's a very, very different way of working. So what you'll find in Kenya is people with an average of 5 years experience. However, you have to be willing to say, okay, well, I will take someone with 12 months experience. They will have the bare minimum. They know they want to do this job as a career, but you are going to need to teach, train. Personally, I always found that as a benefit because for me, when someone comes in, and I'm not trying to sell this at all, but it is genuinely how I believe and at least how I ran when I was director in a recruitment market was I really thought, people who come with less baggage from other places, they're easier to train. They're going to be somebody that I'm able to really say, hey, look, this is my playbook. This is how you should do things. This is what will work, and this is what works here. And I think those are also the things where actually you get someone young, hungry, still with experience, but they're able to be a sponge, take on board everything, and I guess not be so rigid in certain approach. Now, it's not, ultimately the best mix is a bit of both, and may the best talent win. But I guess from my experience, and at the very least, you've got that experience side is still growing here, but I do believe that also helps retention because people are like, wow, I've got a global job. I'm here with this company, I can grow, and I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I'm going to be able to take this kind of spearhead it on and hopefully, create my own path to have growth and have a career. And I think that's really what any employer wants, right? Is they want people that are hungry, that can come in, be a sponge, and obviously are good to work with. And you touched on a few very fair points about, you need to be sympathetic. You need to have the right business culture. You have to reflect your market that you're working in. And of course, when you come offshore, there's going to be things that they have to learn about your market, and also you learn about theirs. And definitely there's no golden bullet, where every country kind of fits into one another. But the thing is here, what I do notice personally, so polite, very, very polite in the sense of they will always apologize, even if there's nothing to apologize for. But I think that's very English
That
as
sounds
well.
quite British, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly. I could drop my pen on the floor and everyone would be like, sorry. I'd be like, it's okay. You don't need to apologize. But I think that's lovely. Of course, also always the how are you? But don't get me wrong, there's also still some elements to that where it's also you've got to be able to have a conversation building from the how are you. And I think for me, it's just seeing the different culture. For example, maybe more so you have to kind of teach this here in Kenya, but the first thing someone will say is hi, and the next thing will be how are you? And that's great, but obviously in a sales call, you also don't know that person yet. And sometimes, in England especially, we're like, hey, or the UK, we're like, I'm not your friend. So what do you want?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
I'm one
so
of those, Alex.
yeah, I
To
agree.
me, anyone who opens a conversation with "How are you?" and I don't know them, instantly makes me suspicious.
Yeah, all right. Like,
And
what do you want, sort of
I
thing,
just
right?
feel like it's a wasted opportunity as well. But anyway, no,
It
but
is. So I
you
think
make
I
a
think that's
go on.
something you need to be fair about. No, I think it's just, it's just to be very fair. Yeah, you're gonna have to train people on certain things, but I don't think that's the worst thing to have to train.
You make a really important point here. One should not underestimate the need to train in. If you're a recruitment business owner, you are going to need to train that person. Probably less so than you would have to train someone who would cost you a great deal more in the
Yeah,
UK. But you can't. They're not ready made with knowledge of your sector and operating processes and indeed
correct.
software, right? You've been there, you've managed offshore teams, as a recruitment business director. So
Mm,
let's just talk about that because I know many recruitment business leaders really struggle with this remote management. Some of them
yeah.
simply can't imagine it, and some of them don't have a systematic approach to it anyway. So, can you give us your 3 or 4 key points for success?
Yeah, definitely. So look, I think from day one, there has to be clear KPIs put in place. Those KPIs should be in an offer letter, at least in my opinion, and also the probation target. Make that as clear as day. Ideally, you can even put a promotional target in there after, probation. It's like, okay, after you've hit probation target, then here's the promotional target as well. That really takes away a lot of the thinking as you go through that journey of that person growing. Those things are already in place. They should be hopefully all attainable because you're pretty much linking whatever other career structures you have already in your business with that. But also, like, I guess for me, it's about making sure people are motivated. They want growth. They're not going to keep knocking on your door if they've got those sorts of things in place. And I think that's going to be absolutely crucial. Otherwise, once you're in the delivery phase, you have to have patience without a shadow of a doubt. The patience is key, but one thing is always so important is if you can get one person that is a subject matter expert, within your sector, that means bringing that new person, fresh person in, get them to learn as much as they possibly can, make sure that's absorbed, but then you've actually got the catalyst there to bring in the next person and they can help train and help share. And I think from my success, at least in what I've experienced, has been is that we made it through the first, look, it's a long path, right? 6 months, a year. You've got to be in this long term. But if you believe that someone's smart enough to retain knowledge and apply that into work, that's crucial. So you need to know that you're investing your time in the right person, but then also think about what culture and what knowledge that they can share with the next people. And for me, when I lived in India and helped set up the offshore there and ramp that up, somebody who was 21 at the time, and God, I was 24, so that's like a decade ago. But living there with that person who was only 21, in healthcare, was kind of doing availability, cold calls, and that side of it, is now in the UK and a director of that same company. And I think if you can only see clear as day that for the right people, the opportunity is there and they can take them, it also means the exact same thing. So I guess for me, it's also about belief, right? You've got to believe that you can find the right people for your business and the right talent. So if you put in the right structures, you put in the right deliverables, and otherwise you need leadership ultimately, and I guess that's where.
What about, for example, frequency of check-in and giving feedback?
Yeah. So one process always, you got to do this, is have a handover in every single day, a handover, a daily update. So firstly, look, syncs in the morning, scrums, whichever you want to call them, they're great. These are a way to get your team kind of all on the same page, whether it's people working from home, people in different country, start your day off like that, right? And at the end of the day, have everybody do a daily update, a handover. Hey, this is what I've worked on. This is what I'm going to work on tomorrow. Why that's so important is you get to see from the instructions in the morning, from all the things that they needed to do. And again, they need to report in the right way. It's got to be high level enough in numbers and the right things that a manager can then see. Yep, you're doing well. Yep, you're understanding certain things. And that there gives you confidence that, okay, this person is learning, they're growing, they know their strategy. Maybe not a great day, but they already know what they need to do for tomorrow. So actually, the daily updates allow there to be quick course correction. And I think that's crucial when you're managing offshore, because you've got to be able to know when something's not quite working, when you've got to tweak and what you've got to change it. But you've got to be very willing to kind of keep being very flexible, I would say, but definitely keep those structures in place, and they can kind of update over time and maybe less frequently as you move on and you build trust. But first 6 months until someone's passed probation, definitely daily updates will help so much. As a director, I'd read those at the end of the day, like, right, that person gets it, that person understands, and you kind of just move forward and into the next day, and you know where you need to help.
Right. Now, I know a lot of small business owners who are very shy about actually doing what I'm going to call rather boldly inspection. So sampling of the work that someone's doing on their behalf. And, when someone's really new, this is how they can so easily diverge from the path that you thought they were on if you're not checking, can't they? So just going back to this KPI point, the idea that you can just say, well, your KPIs are, fill a job within a month is utterly inadequate. There need to be some KPIs around input. And given that in the majority of cases, our offshored worker will be resourcing. Yeah. Now, there's shades and shades of resourcing, from pure internet-based research all the way to full candidate interviewing and presenting a candidate to a client. So these are all on the scale. So we need to have a clear idea about how much of that you're asking them to do. And second, given that they are resourcing, they're often dependent on what volume of job vacancies are being given to, right? So they can't make a placement if no one gave them a job order to work, or the job order was essentially unfillable. And that's pretty demotivating. Doesn't matter where in the world you sit. But, it's simple things like thinking, okay, if I go through this new job order with my resourcer, then what I want to see is 20 suitably qualified people who have engaged with this opportunity, as in expressed an interest, back within one working day, for example. depends on your market, how
Sure.
realistic that
Yeah, no,
particular
definitely.
example is. Therefore, you can sample from that list of 20, can't you? And say, well,
Correct.
no way, yes, bang on, but let's have a look at the difference between them.
Yeah.
And here's another example. If we then look at, well, what is the outreach message they're sending?
Hmm.
Is it, oh, you lucky person, I don't know you from Adam, but I've got the ideal job for you kind of style, which,
Without even knowing them, right?
yeah. And look, there are markets where you'll get a result with that, but
Yeah,
it's not, for example, 200K DevOps specialists who
exactly.
or private practice lawyers who will just delete that kind of approach.
Correct.
So it really is worth going quite, I'm going to use the word micromanagement. Why is it?
Yeah, I don't.
It's not a bad thing by definition. It's a
It's
bad
not, and
thing
you want
when
people
it's
to
a
have
bad
autonomy. I
thing.
get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also about knowing where the numbers are, so you know where to help in that process, right? Because at
Mhm.
the end of the day, it's what you put in, you will get out. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, at least from a management point of view, I believe, and even if it doesn't matter if you are a single founder and you've got an offshore team member, which should still put the KPIs building up to the end goal, which is the GP, it's the revenue. And at least that helps you identify, is it enough calls that are being made? Is it the right quality of CVs in? And yeah, and I guess
Mhm.
also building that pipeline, right?
Yes, which is where I was going to go. So I found it very helpful for offshore staff to have some kind of background project,
100%.
like building a pipeline of, let's say there's a particular skill set that you often find hard to resource, a pipeline of people that may not have engaged with you yet, but they've been identified and we've put them onto a circulation list, for example. And or with someone a bit more experienced, it might be even doing some ad chasing if that's appropriate again in
Correct. Yeah, yeah.
your market. Okay. Now, a lot of this guidance, of course, could be given by the employer of record, although whether it would fall on deaf ears is another question.
Sure.
I want to talk about employers of record for a moment because that is what you guys do. How can an EOR enhance the success of this engagement or damage it? What specifically does does global capability do as an EOR?
Yeah.
And where do you add value and where can EORs take away?
So look, I think firstly, from an employer of record point of view, global capability, obviously an entity within Kenya. So for me, I moved halfway across the world for the right reasons. And I guess let me add value where I've learned in the past, but also where I can be a safe pair of hands and provide a bit of leadership to any other recruitment founders and businesses that are looking to go offshore. So for me, it was then enhancing that AOR into it's called a GCC model, so a managed global capability center. And effectively, what
Mhm.
that allows a business to do is to set up offshore, have their own managed global capability center, which is managed by global capability. And that allows there to be the EOR, the full IT infrastructure. You're not having to worry about laptops being sent around, again, all the compliance that comes with that, servers in the UK or US, Australia, so forth, and also VPNs and just the right GDPR elements that you need to have have a managed GCC. But also you could go and hire someone on EOR and have that remotely from home. But again, you've got to scrutinize data protection and the right things that come into that
Mhm.
regard. So for me, it's the EOR
Important
and that
checklist.
element.
Let's just double check that. So IT
Sure.
infrastructure, because otherwise you literally will be shipping your own laptops out
Yeah,
there.
and who knows if you'll get it back if that person doesn't work out, I guess.
Okay. And overall guarantees about connectivity. UK servers. Now, this is really important from a data processing point of view.
Correct.
And it's not something that most people would think to look at.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned GDPR awareness and training, which you guys are good in that. And then as far as licenses are concerned, obviously every recruitment business uses its own combination of
Yeah,
licenses.
of course.
So they provide those licenses, but do you have people who can support with the use of LinkedIn or Bullhorn or whatever? Is that something
Yeah.
you
So
guys do?
yeah, so we've got different setups for different clients. Look, firstly, every client has the option at the beginning of onboarding. How do you want your IT to be set up? They can have a remote desktop connection that's accessing their environment. That's
Hmm.
obviously critical as well. And then, of course, if you're going to take other elements of that kind of supply chain, I think ultimately you're going to make sure that for us, we will always make sure that the training is in place, and that, of course, on top of that, you've then got the infrastructure to support it, from licenses such as Windows license. Different clients have LinkedIn recruiters. We would then invoice that separately. And again, we license the laptop. That keeps it straightforward. And then additional requests can come in from clients depending on what they're looking for at the beginning, whether that's a Zoom phone or the telephone connections, and also then things like LinkedIn or CV Library. We definitely allow them to obviously put that in as a request, and then we'll approve it. We add it to the invoice, and that's clean as it needs to be.
Or presumably they can just give direct access to their own licenses.
Correct.
Okay, lovely. Now, let's get down to the commercials, shall we? So, just focusing now on Kenya, because I know listeners will want to know this. What are the relative costs involved, and what examples of ROI can you point to, Alex?
Yeah, so I think firstly, when you're looking at in comparison to the UK, you got 70% saving straight away. If you come to Kenya, the return on investment is really as clear as it needs to be. I think if you're looking at 70% of a minimum wage employee within the UK, pretty much you just need to be able to hopefully fill, depends on your percentage of your deals that you've got coming in, but 1 or 2 to really make a return on investment within that 1 year for one employee.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I would hope that your people actually manage to make a bit more than that.
Yeah, of course, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, listen, it's just at the bare minimum, but yeah, you're quite right.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And are there any additional setup costs?
No other additional, no. Everything is one price, all in one. Again, trying to make it really straightforward. It's like a subscription service. You pay monthly. That allows you to have the flexibility. It's 30 days notice. Really, there's no placement fee. If you need a replacement, then again, there's no additional cost with that. And really, it's just a very, very straightforward monthly fee that includes all the IT, my support with the implementation, and everything else that can come with it. So try to keep it straightforward, and not have to worry about really, for me, is I don't want to make that conversation any more of a challenge when you want to focus on the right things. So make your what you're selling at least desirable as much to anybody that you can offer.
Now, Alex, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I'm sure that Alex can talk you through what his people there can offer you, but also other potential sources of offshore employees as well. Alex, how should listeners who are interested in knowing more, how should they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so look, firstly, LinkedIn's a great place. Our website, at the end of the day, you can find us on Google, of course. So Global Capability, you'll be able to search that. My email is alex.hashash@globalcapability or global-capability.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, and should be the only Alex Hashash out there.
Okay, that's HASHASH.
Okay. Correct. Thank you.
All right. Alex, thank you so much. This is definitely an opportunity worth exploring, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from some listeners. Those listeners who tune in regularly will know that my work is as a holistic board advisor about organic growth, and that this is one part of your business transformation. So if you'd like to know other means of efficiencies in your business, how to bring in more business, which is what many, many people are interested in at the moment, and how to deliver it more effectively, and how to get more recurring revenue, then please get in touch with me, Alison at recruitmentleadership.co.uk, or on LinkedIn, or as I mentioned, tune into the Recruitment Leadership Podcast, check me out on Amazon, or go to the website for a whole wealth of other resources. So, Alex Hashash of Global Capability, thank you so much for joining me.
You've been listening to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, review, and share so that others can find the podcast too. We really appreciate your support. If you have any questions about the topics covered or wish to find out more about recruitment leadership, please email alison@recruitmentleadership.co.uk, referencing the podcast. We're also on LinkedIn, where you can follow Recruitment Leadership and connect with Alison Humphries. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us next time for another episode of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.